I literally couldn't retain what was in front of me because I couldn't focus on what was in front of me. I wasn't here.
In my head.
Hey everyone, so it's kind of funny, I was trying to decide what topic to do because I had 3 topics in my head that I was thinking of doing. One being dissociation, because I talked about that in the last video. Another one being healing, and what does healing look like for people, and another one being how to ask for help. And appropriately, I went outside. I thought it was going to be colder today than it is outside. Thankfully, it's not that cold, but it is foggy as hell out here, and I was like, well, that's my answer. Then I have to talk about dissociation tonight. So for anybody who's new here, I speak about mental health. I go on walks, and it's just kind of what I do. My channel is all about humanizing mental health and getting people to see that, you know, we all go through mental health issues. We all have different ways that we struggle with mental health, different ways that we cope with mental health issues, but we're all human. It's totally normal to go through everything that we're going through, whoever it is that we are and whatever it is that we're facing. So I'm going to continue on my walk, and we're going to talk about dissociation tonight. Okay, so a quick recap on what dissociation is for people who are not aware. It's not disassociation, it's dissociation. And it's this kind of like fuzzy feeling that happens. It's, you know, I don't understand all the inner workings of it, but it's generally like this kind of fuzzy, not connected to your body state that we get into. You may think of it as daydreaming. Daydreaming is a form of dissociation. It can also be like the classic example is when you go for a drive and you go somewhere, and then you start to get closer and you arrive at your destination. You're like, wait a minute, I don't remember actually being here. I don't remember controlling the car. So I don't remember the time in between, or maybe if you don't drive, maybe just walking, you're like, wait a minute, how did I walk down this block? Like, I don't even remember walking. That could be a form of dissociation. More extreme forms are completely not being in touch with your body and losing memories entirely. Some people do this for years. Some people travel, some people sleepwalk. But again, it doesn't have to be that extreme. Sometimes it's just this feeling like you're having an out-of-body experience, you're not connected to your body. It may start to feel like things in your environment are a little unreal, which would be derealization, and it could also feel like your body's not your own, which would be depersonalization. But this is all related to the concept of dissociation, not disassociation, dissociation. And it's something that I probably did in my own life for decades, not realizing it. And I'll talk about it. It was really stressful. So let me keep walking, and then we'll talk about what my experience was like. I went through years, and it's funny because this had to be going on for decades, but years. Car. Years not understanding why was I always so exhausted? Why was I always so tired? Why did it feel like I couldn't focus on things? And I wasn't as into psychology. I mean, I always loved psychology, but I wasn't like so into it the way I am now. So I was kind of clueless. I thought, like, I was online searching for stuff, and I'm like, why am I always tired? I was like, okay, chronic fatigue. Like, I've heard of that before. So like, let's look up chronic fatigue. And I'm like, no, I don't know. That wasn't clicking. So I thought, okay, maybe I have a diet problem. So I started looking up like what dietary problems would cause problems with energy. I kind of thought I had an energy problem. So I'm also vegan, and I thought, well, I don't eat the best. I don't have like the best diet as a vegan, so I thought maybe I'm like missing something here. So I looked into diet for a while. I changed my diet around a few times, and I'm like, no, none of this is really helping. I still feel tired, and I thought like maybe it's depression. Maybe I'm just depressed, and that certainly could have been a contributor. Maybe I would have moments of depression, but I was like, no, it's still like this is not quite depression. Like there's this weird foggy confusion, inability to focus thing that happens, and sometimes it's constant. I'm like, why? That feeling that I'm expressing right now to you, that like, why, what, that was going on constantly. So then I thought maybe I have like a thyroid problem, or is it the thyroid or the hypothyroid? I don't even know. I just remember looking up all these things and trying to figure out, is it hormones? Like, what the hell is going on? Because this is not how a body is supposed to feel. It can't be. It can't be, because I've had days when my body doesn't feel this way, and that feels right. So what the hell is this? And it turned out when my ex was breaking up with me at the end of 2015, and I'm sorry I keep repeating this, but it's relevant. Our couples therapist started mentioning the word trauma, and I realized I had PTSD. Well, not her, but the other therapist that she referred me to confirmed it, basically. And in the course of learning about PTSD, they started talking about dissociation and dissociative symptoms, and I'm like, this sounds a lot like that thing that happens to me all the time. And as I was learning about it, like I was seeing this individual therapist. I only saw her for five sessions, but she, like, it was on the top of my mind, this dissociation thing, and I'm like, okay, this might be something that's going on here. And as I was talking with her, she was ending a session with me, and she said something nice to me, and right away I dissociated, and I could like feel it. I could feel that it happened, which I typically didn't notice, like any kind of switch. This was kind of new to me to notice that there was a switch, and I could feel that I dissociated. And she said to me, she's like, you're not completely here right now, or she said something like that, like, or maybe she even said you dissociated. She brought it to my attention, and I was like, no, you're right. And she pointed out that it was because she said something nice about me, which totally messed with my mind, because I was like, why does something nice trigger me that I have to escape it with dissociation? Because dissociation is usually a defense against things. It's a pulling outside of your body. In the case of trauma, particularly when you have a traumatic event happen and you feel like your life is threatened and you don't feel like you can fight back or run away in flight, as they call it, you freeze. And during that freeze period, you may dissociate. And dissociation is like disconnecting from your body, so you don't have to feel the pain that's going on inside your body. So it's a defense, and I was defending myself against her saying something nice to me. So just think about how weird that is. But it was such a relief to finally have a name for it and to understand, like, okay, I don't have to change my diet. I don't have to do these other things. I just have to learn what dissociation is and learn how to fix it. And the solution is grounding techniques and grounding skills and resilience. And I have videos about all that stuff here on this channel, if you're interested in that. But I went through a period of learning grounding techniques, and that was enough to get me back to a place where I could manage the dissociation. And that is awesome. But I'm going to keep walking, and we're going to talk a little bit further about this. I think I'm going to try, if I can find a good place, I'm going to try dissociating in front of you, because I can control some of my dissociating if I want to, which I never really want to. It's not something I like to do, but we'll talk about it. Alright, I've got my nice space here that I like with my lighting. I guess foggy Mondays are when nobody's here. So I've got, my glasses are kind of fogging, so I apologize if you see that. Not that it really matters, but let's see if I can dissociate while I have the opportunity. So I can control it. and I come back to who I am, I'm actually like semi-conscious while I'm doing it, so I can hear, I can see, I can talk. Although I haven't really tried to talk when I've done it purposefully, and I feel like if I try to talk, that's going to break the dissociation, but let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm going to finish talking, and you may see my eyes cross, I don't know, because I know my vision gets blurry, and let's see what happens exactly. So here we go. Okay, so I've been dissociated for a second. It feels kind of weird. I feel like my eyes are just crossed. I don't feel so disconnected from things. I don't know what it looks like on the camera. Maybe because I'm out in public, it's harder for me to really take it back a little bit. So yeah, if I'm talking, then I can't concentrate enough to keep the dissociation going. So that's my personal experience with dissociation. I don't know if you noticed anything there. I mean, I could tell that I was looking around and I could see what I was looking at, but it was felt out of focus. So that's like a very, very mild dissociation. But, you know, if I didn't want to feel the pain of something, I could do that. And I would still feel the pain, but it would numb the pain a little bit. Almost like when you have alcohol. Like there's a little bit of like a numb feeling. Like when you have like just a tiny bit of alcohol, you don't really get very much, not even a buzz, I would say. It's almost like that feeling. Except usually with alcohol, you don't have like you don't have that whole like loss of focus. But so again, I can kind of control dissociation a little bit. Most of the time, people don't control dissociation. And like I said, I would never want to dissociate. Unless it was like something like a dentist chair, I could see myself wanting to. But I've learned through healing from PTSD that it's not really so great to get used to using dissociation as a coping mechanism. It's not a good trade-off for losing connection to your life. Because if you do it regularly, as I had been doing for years and years and years, because I believe that I truly started dissociating when my parents were divorcing, which was really... I don't even know the dates because it was kind of traumatic for me, but I always say from 8 years old to 13 years old, somewhere around that time. I was like a long, drawn-out thing. But I think that's when I probably started dissociating and not knowing what I was doing. I didn't have control over it. I didn't have a context for it. And basically, it's really sad, actually. Like, I wasn't connected to my life most of the time. And actually, now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm remembering for when I was trying to figure out what was going on and why was I so exhausted, I kept going back to this one memory that I had of walking from one class to another in high school and being outside and feeling at peace and feeling connected. And for some reason, that memory stayed in my mind, and I always felt like, why can't I ever feel like that again? What is going on here? Why do I never, ever, 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 ever feel like that? And that's what it was. It was the dissociating. So it's kind of sad because I lived years and years of my life not really fully experiencing them. Like, I'm getting sad just thinking about that. But anyway, that's my experience of dissociating. I couldn't control it until I learned what it was, and then somehow I guess I realized like I can kind of control it just a little bit. But the other day, I mentioned in the last video that I did, something set it off, and then it just happened. And when something sets it off and I don't do it intentionally myself, there's like a period of coming out of the fog. I call it the fog. And it's you can't control how fast you come out of it. It's kind of like you just have to wait for the fog to lift, and it's really frustrating, and you feel half attached to the world, half attached to what you're doing. Like, you can't focus that well. Like I mentioned, I bumped into the wall on the way out the door because I'm not fully in my body, so my balance is off. Like, it really feels shitty. It just feels shitty. So it's not something that I ever really want to do, and when something triggers it like that, I really can't control how fast I come out of it. Now, other people, you know, there's a whole class of disorders, dissociative disorders. You have dissociative amnesia, which is when the dissociation causes you to forget large chunks of your time, which also is related to dissociative fugue, which is when you like travel. That's kind of like the things, like you move, you maybe like go outside, or maybe you even travel to another country, some people, and also lose that chunk of memory. So that's dissociative amnesia. You have depersonalization, derealization disorder. I mentioned what those two terms are. And that's when you don't feel connected to your body, would be depersonalization, and when you don't feel connected to the world would be derealization. And things kind of seem like dreamlike and weird, and wonky is another word I use a lot. It's like wonkiness. Then you have dissociative identity disorder, which is very much more complex, but it's still related to dissociation in that you, my understanding of it, and I still don't know very much about it, so I apologize. You have a traumatic event in childhood, most likely, and during the formation of your own personality, I guess it splits off, like you dissociate and switch into like a new identity. It used to be called multiple personality disorder, but now it's dissociative identity disorder, and it's like you switch into a different identity, and I guess over time each identity forms its own personality, and then it's hard, I can't even say you, because sometimes people develop these extra personalities. They usually call them alters, and there's no core you anymore. There's just like a whole bunch of people inside your head. And I laugh because I don't mean to laugh to discount any of the distress, because it's very distressing at times, but it's kind of funny too, because it's like you have a whole family of people that you have to learn to get along with and manage within your own head, and that's very stressful, but it's also kind of funny, the situations that everybody can get into. So I'm not going to get into dissociative identity disorder. Like I said, it's complex, but just be aware it exists. So if somebody feels like they lose chunks of time, but then you start noticing like weird things are going on, like why am I wearing a hat? And maybe you have like a chocolate bar on your counter or something, and you're like, but I don't like chocolate, I'm allergic to chocolate, why is this here? It could be that you have another identity. So that would be dissociative identity disorder. And then there's also other specified dissociative disorder, I believe, I hope I'm getting that right, which is kind of like a catch-all for all kinds of different dissociative symptoms that may be going on. And you also may have something you also see in dissociative identity disorder, like fragmented memories that you kind of like dissociate into, maybe kind of like what I went through the other day. So that's been a brief overview. I just want to get that in there because I'm talking about dissociation. But let me walk a little bit more, and I know I had something else to say, but I always lose a little bit of track of time what I'm saying while I'm talking, because I get kind of into it. So I'll keep walking and we'll figure out what that was that I wanted to say. I'm really liking this fog tonight. So usually when I'm in this spot, somebody pulls up within like 5 or 10 minutes. I don't know why. It's not always the same person. It's very inconvenient, but I'll try to talk and maybe finish the video as best I can here. So I wanted to talk about how dissociation has affected me as far as being able to work, because the last video I did was about money and work, so this ties directly into that. I don't know when this started. I just noticed it, like, once I learned what dissociation was, I started like realizing like, oh, this is what's going on, and I started paying attention, and I realized for me, for whatever reason, when I do what feels like work, strenuous work, I'll dissociate. And for me, that is like data entry, boring work, which is interesting because I've done a lot of that kind of work in my past, and I know I've had traumatic experiences while at those workplaces, not necessarily because of those workplaces, but I have been so stressed for my stressed in my life and possibly for my life, I don't know. That's why I'm describing it as traumatic. In those kinds of workplaces, I've experienced so much stress. This was a period of time when I just hated getting up and getting out of bed. I hated going to work. I hated coming home from work. I hated anticipating going the next day. So all of that stress, I guess I used dissociation to cope with it. Again, not consciously, because I didn't even know what it was. But I can kind of remember sitting at my computer in a lot of different settings, a lot of different jobs, and feeling like I wasn't fully there. Like I was kind of daydreaming, kind of not totally there. And I think that's transferred over to how it is for me now. So when I do things that are like menial, boring tasks, I start to dissociate. And the problem is when I do that and it's not purposeful, and then it's really hard to come out of. So what I have learned to do, for better or worse, is to be aware when I get into those tasks that may be something that happens. And honestly, I try to just avoid those tasks. If it doesn't feel like something that I'm going to enjoy, something that I can engage with and stay present with, then I don't want to do it. So I avoid it. And you know, that's what I've learned, is that's just not for me. Other people will be able to do those things and engage and feel good and be present and love it. But for me, that makes me dissociate. So that's not what I'm here to do. That's kind of my interpretation of that. That's not my calling, or whatever you want to call it. That's not my passion. So I can do work in other ways. For example, doing what I'm doing here on YouTube, putting together videos, that is a different kind of work that doesn't feel so stressful that I need to dissociate. Believe me, it is stressful. I have stressful moments all the time, but it's enjoyable enough that I don't dissociate. Now, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing that I can do, or it's the only thing I should be doing, but it's what I do now. So I just wanted to put it out there that this is an example of a way where dissociating could affect somebody's work, because I primarily took jobs sitting at a computer because that's what I knew how to do. It's what I was good at. And the problem there is when you're dissociated sitting at a computer, what happens when somebody talks to you? Now you're like fuzzy-headed, foggy, can't retain things, lose chunks of your memory. It doesn't jive very well. It gets very hard to do that type of job. And unfortunately, those are the kinds of jobs that are usually available at the lower end with no experience. So, you know, you get slim pickings on what's out there in the job market. And for me, that's what I would wind up doing, and wasn't good, not good. So I just wanted to kind of give an example of how dissociation could show up in the workplace and how it could hinder your ability to do your job. What else did I want to say? I wanted to say, oh gosh, I forgot. You see, oh, okay. This is kind of funny. Short-term memory. For a long time, you know, I don't know how many of you know my story, but when I was with my ex and I saw that first therapist who wasn't a good therapist, one of the first things I said to her, and I brought it up a couple times, is I don't have a good short-term memory. I don't know why. Long-term memory is fine, but short-term memory, I couldn't tell you what I did yesterday. I couldn't tell you what's going on. Now, currently I can, because I've managed my dissociative symptoms, but back then I couldn't. And what I realized is the reason I had a bad short-term memory was because I was dissociating all the time, and I literally couldn't retain what was in front of me because I couldn't focus on what was in front of me. I wasn't here. I wasn't present enough. Okay, so that's out of the way. I wanted to say that, but what do you do? What do you do about dissociating? Well, you ground yourself. You use grounding techniques. And this is only for like simple dissociating. Like everybody has their own level of problems. Like somebody with dissociative identity disorder, grounding may help, of course, but I don't think that's going to resolve the whole problem, because there could be trauma mixed in. There, somebody who's depressed, maybe it's individual to every person. You know, this channel's about humanizing mental health. Let me just emphasize the point that when it comes to dissociating, it's going to be individual for every person. But if you are like me, where the dissociation was fairly straightforward, for me it was PTSD, it was reaction to specific triggers in my environment, I could recognize what triggers were going to set me off, and I could prepare for them. So I used grounding techniques, and grounding techniques are techniques to get yourself back in touch with your body, back in touch with how you're feeling, which is the opposite of what you want to do when you're feeling a trigger, is get inside your body. So I had to like fight against my urge to not want to do that. But I've mentioned it before, for me, feeling the inside of the bottom of my feet, not with my hands, but feeling it in my body, helped connect me to the rest of my body, because I tend to be very cerebral and like stay up in my head and forget, like, oh yeah, I have a torso, I have arms, I have knees, I have a waist, I have a butt, I have legs, I have feet. So when I would feel the bottom of my feet, like bring that into my attention, it would help me realize, oh, there's like a whole body down there that I'm not paying attention to right now. Something else that would help me were scents, like candles, essential oils, things like that. Just because the smells a very strong way to get in touch with your body. Also, simple things like you just use your 5 senses. So if you realize you're dissociated or you're going to dissociate, look around, look for certain colors, start like naming things. Pick something out in specific and like look at the little details of it and start describing it in your mind, like, okay, and there's a line that goes down the right side of it and it's a little thicker on the bottom, but there's like this bluish color that kind of comes out and it's faded. Like, describe those things and it will get you in touch with what's in front of you, which will bring you back in touch with reality and your body. So grounding techniques helped me. You could probably find more online, I'm sure. And of course, the therapist is a great way to help you ground yourself. Somebody's here, so I'm gonna move and then we're gonna finish the video. Okay. Wrapping up dissociation. So my experience of dissociation is going to be my experience of dissociation. It's not going to be the way that everybody experiences it. As I mentioned, there is a lot of dissociation that is uncontrollable and very frustrating. You can get control over it, but it may take some skilled work with the therapist to get that controlled work over it. Some of the more severe dissociative disorders, you may need that extra guidance because you need grounding, and you may not be able to provide grounding for yourself. The cars are distracting me because I feel like it's loud. Oh, I kind of like this. I should use this as a thumbnail, don't you think? But I usually do colorful thumbnails. How am I going to make it colorful? We'll figure that out. Dissociation sucks. You know, like all mental problems, it sucks. It's a natural function of our body, just like most mental disorders kind of arise from natural defenses. So it's a natural defense. It typically, I believe, shows up when we're in a traumatic situation and we freeze and we can't escape that situation, so we dissociate. And for some of us, that becomes the way that our body copes with all kinds of stresses thereafter. So, what is your experience with dissociation? How does it relate to you? I have to say, you know, in the example of like alters, switching and dissociative identity disorder, it may not be so obvious that dissociation is going on because, again, it could just be a missing chunk of time. So there's not like a feeling. Like, I keep describing this feeling of a fog, but it doesn't mean that everyone's going to have a feeling. So I want to know what your experience with dissociation is like, if you've experienced it yourself. If you have not experienced it, have you heard of this term before, and does this help you get a better understanding of it? Let's talk about it with the community below, As always, I'd appreciate if you would subscribe. If you're new here, please subscribe. I do videos Monday through Friday on mental health. And hit the bell icon. There's a bell somewhere around here if you would like to get all of my videos, notified from all of my videos. And thanks for stopping by with me, everyone.